All right. Monumental day in the Steve Cohen era. The Mets landing one of the best pitchers of at least the last 10 years in Max Scherzer. The excitement is through the roof. There was Spaces hosted last night with like 3,000 people going all night, people waiting for the signing. Then you have the crash and burn, Joe, of like everybody in the morning being like, well, it didn't get agreed to after I fell asleep. So we're being used by Scott Boras. And then, of course, they closed the deal today. I mean, obviously, you and I have been excited all day to get on and react, and the podcast this week is a long form conversation of really what's next ahead. But today is about Max Scherzer. Joe, are you? I mean, describe. I mean, I'm shocked. Let me just be honest with you. You've been talking about like this has to be the move. This has to be the guy. No excuses. While I've been like he's never coming here. It doesn't matter the money. Clearly, I was wrong. The Mets have signed Max Scherzer to a 3-year, 130 million around, whatever it is. It's nuts. How are we feeling?
It is a great day to be a Mets fan. And I know that very quickly Mets fans move on. I have all over my Twitter mentions.
Yeah,
What's
I know.
next? Is Javi? Let's take a moment to sit back, relax, and enjoy the fact that the Mets are now pairing Max Scherzer with Jacob DeGrom at the front of their rotation for the 2022 season. Steve Cohen certainly showing that money is not an object when it is something that he wants. And I think this quells a lot of narratives about what people are willing to come to the Mets. Are they not? I think this proves the point that people do want Steve Cohen's money. And it's a monumental day for this franchise. I think it's a statement signing. I was saying to someone earlier that it's obviously at a much bigger financial scale, but it's very reminiscent of the Pedro Martinez signing in 2003. Back when the Mets signed Pedro, it was clear he didn't have 4 years left. Just like Scherzer probably doesn't have 3 years left of high-level pitching. But you're paying for the right now to make a statement, to change the culture of the organization. And I think it's going to set forward motion to bring other people in as time goes on. And I think it's only a huge positive.
I think what you just said there at the end is to me something that stands out. Like number one, I'm excited. You get Max Scherzer, right? And you're in this window with Jacob DeGrom where, obviously we're holding out hope that he could stay healthy, but the belief is you're in this window now where you have one of the game's best pitchers ever, add the other one that's one of the game's best pitchers ever, and go for it. And 3 to 5 year World Series quote. And now it's like, oh, this is real. You are going for it. But outside of all of that, the thing that I thought of was like this is a statement move for the future, right? Like this is we have this kind of money, like FU money. We will do everything we can to go out and win baseball games. It's not like we are not afraid of taking gigantic risk. Although I will say, like the fact this contract didn't get to a 4th year, I was kind of like, this risk isn't really as serious because people are fascinated by the annual average, which is record setting, right? It's over 40 mil. But the term of this deal is 3 years. He could opt out after 2, which would be the best thing in the world for Mets fans. If Max Scherzer is good enough in a 2-year window that he's opting out at like 40 years old, that means you got every last penny's worth from him in these next 2 years. But to me, this is a guy like Max Scherzer, union rep, respected winner, one of the craziest like competitors in the game, said, yes, I'm being offered a lot of money, but I also believe that the Mets can win. I'm going to go maybe finish my career with the Mets. And I believe in Steve Cohen and the direction of Billy Epler. And I think to me, that is opening the door for other guys to go, maybe I do want to go play in New York and I want to go play for the New York Mets. That to me is something that I don't know. I really don't remember in our lifetime. You bring up Pedro Martinez, and yes, that was a special time period where they did acquire a lot of top talent and they did make a serious run. But that feels like so long ago that today was a special day where it's like, be the kings of the offseason. Money does not matter. I don't care. And gives you a chance to be in the conversation when the games are played.
And for me, like you mentioned, the length, that's huge. Going to that 4th year definitely had me a little worried. I think you got 2 years out of Scherzer kind of for sure. Obviously pending health, anyone could get hurt anytime, but I feel very confident in what I'll get the next 2 years out of Max Scherzer. And the 3rd year is kind of going to be what it is. And I think it, like you said, it's a fantastic statement by them. I think it'll help them as we go forward, and they're pursuing other free agents. I know that, like I said, Baez is a talk, and if the shortstop market is any indicator as to what Baez is going to get lengthwise, I wouldn't feel too confident that that's happening. But I think you're going to see them attract some players and it's not even necessarily the star players. I think as time goes on now, you're going to see potentially some people sign for with the Mets for, maybe a little less money than, an alternative location. So all positives, I think, to take from here. The only thing is obviously there's some risk, but Steve Cohen can afford said risk. The difference between the Wilpon ownership and the Steve Cohen ownership is being able to afford that risk. Like the Wilpons were kind of crippled by a $10 million salary going wrong.
Jed Lowry deal.
Yeah, exactly. A Jed Lowry deal basically crippled their functionality. Steve Cohen can afford
8 Jed Lowrys in a month.
Exactly. So he's not too concerned, but it's an exciting day. I think there's no other way to put it. And Mets fans should be overjoyed, and don't worry about what's next. Just enjoy the fact that in a 4-day span, the Mets signed Max Scherzer, Starling Marte, Mark Hanna, Eduardo Escobar, added $86 million to their luxury tax payroll. Right now, their luxury tax payroll is, I estimate, around $274 million. And there is still more they're going to do. May not be super high level, but they're going to spend more money. They're not done.
No, they're definitely not done. We know they're going to sign another starter where you're looking at the not Stromans of the world. I think people that are expecting that, you're in for a reality check. I think that they're not looking for somebody that requires that kind of term and number. Now, Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like they're going to look for a guy that's probably, I would assume, on that 2-year timeline that Canna, Escobar, Cano, the Mets have a lot of guys on this 2-year timeline payroll that you'd probably want your number 4, number 5 starter. They're presumably going to sign, Rodon, probably not, but Kikuchi. There was another mention in here, I'll try to pull it up, of Matt Boyd. And, where guys like that you're thinking, okay, like we're not going to be signing up for another 5-year deal because it's for this window now. It's a 2-year window to me that the Mets are going for it. And then you're going to restart another window. And there was another comment in here, hopefully our young pitchers are ready, from Terrence right here. And yeah, they have some arms in the system that hopefully after 2 to 3 years will be up, like Matthew Allen. So I think that they're not done. They did a great job executing a plan. It is not easy to come out of free agency and dictate the market. That's what is so impressive to me about the Mets. It's not January, February. It's not after the lockout. It's like, no, we're getting this done. Like we know what it takes to get Marte. We know what it takes to get Canna and Escobar. And then you look at the defense, like Canna strong in right field, Marte strong in center. It brings in guys like Scherzer that want good defense behind them. And presumably this 4th or 5th starter they're going to sign that is probably going to be a contact pitcher or a guy that is more prone to, that needs defense behind him because he's not Jacob DeGrom. And it's nice to see them actually executing a really well thought out plan in a time frame for Billy Epler that has to be going 1,000 miles an hour right now.
I can't imagine how teams are operating this week and over this past weekend. Usually there's so much patience involved in every negotiation. You just have to wait things out. But now it's like a trade deadline, right? Like every July 30th, 31st, like it's crazy for those couple days. That's kind of the window that we're in right now. And I agree that I think the visions for a pitcher should be that 2-year deal. Andy Martino wrote that Yusei Kikuchi is someone that is on their radar. Kind of similar in a sense to how Taijuan Walker pitched. Had a big first half, made the all-star team, and then struggled mightily in the second half. He seemed to indicate that Carlos Rodon's not someone on their radar, so we'll see if that changes. But Rodon's quite a risk health-wise, and you wonder if they're looking for someone that they feel a little more comfortable on his health going forward. But like I said, they're not done. They're going to want another starter. I even have visions of calling Rich Hill and saying, hey, Rich Hill, do you want to be the long reliever / sixth starter here? Because I mentioned it the other day, you're going to need 10 starters to get through the season. So I want as many of these guys as I could possibly pull in. And the Mets, they planned around Scherzer. I know that, rumors came out about
It's
Kevin
risky.
Gausman. It was a risky move, but I think they had some more confidence than obviously Twitter knew or you or I knew about. Because while the rumors were that they offered Gausman more money than he took from Toronto, I actually think that it was kind of like, yeah, we'll give you this. We just have to see through Max Scherzer first, because they weren't going to sign both Scherzer and Gausman. And I don't think they preferred Gausman to Scherzer either. So
No,
I
no,
think
no. No
we're
way.
this is the money we'll give you. You just need to see if we get Scherzer. And he basically said, I'm going to take the money now and not risk it. And once I saw Gausman and Gray both go off the market, and I realized that the Mets fallback options were very limited, they had to have confidence that they were landing Max Scherzer. And, I know we didn't necessarily have the same confidence, but it feels like it was part of a plan and they just executed.
Yeah, we were always afraid because that's what we're used to. But on the flip side, you have to realize now if you're Scott Boras, you look at the Mets as a financial powerhouse in all of sports where you can only lead them the wrong way for so long if you're Scott Boras because you can't fracture that relationship because he represents so many players, not now, but also now over these next however many years that it's clear that he knew he had to be honest with the Mets. And it's clear that the Mets last night probably felt 90% chance Scherzer was going to sign here while they let those guys go because how the agents work is a guy like Gausman, that agent's going to call the Mets and be like, now or never. And we're still on hold for someone else. Sorry. And he walks. And, you saw Robbie Ray sign today. Never thought they were going to be in the market for guys with a pick attached to them. But the
Nope.
pitching market moved fast is the overall point. And, it's fascinating. And we're not going to really get into it because it doesn't affect the Mets. But Stroman's market maybe isn't what people thought, or it's just not moving as fast, or he wants to play out this process. But one thing I want to move to, because it's dominated a lot of the comment section and a lot of conversation, because Mets fans can never just enjoy signing an amazing signing for 24 hours. They are already talking about the comment that's posted right there. Is Baez realistic, especially after the Seager deal? You know how optimistic I've been for Baez, Joe. I do not think Javi Baez is going to be back with the Mets. I would love to be wrong. I think the Mets are in a situation right now where he's probably has the leverage for a 5 to 6 year deal at a really nice annual average. And I don't think the way this Mets team is constructed, they want to go there for their second baseman.
In my opinion, if Baez is to sign over the next day or two, it won't be with the Mets.
Yes.
Because at that point, I would have the expectation that he would, he's not as good of a player as Marcus Semien or Corey Seager. But if the length of deals that those guys got is any indicator as to the type of length that Javi is going to get, I don't think the Mets are looking to play at, a 5, maybe 5, but probably not like 5, 7, things like that. I don't think the Mets are looking to play there. I think if you want to be optimistic about the chances of Baez returning to the Mets, you would want him to not sign prior to the lockout and then have the lockout last all the way till like February. And then there's that scramble for signing people, and maybe the market for him in a 2-week stretch is less so as far as length of deal goes. And maybe you can pull off 2-3 years at a good AAV, give him an opt out or whatever, so he could revisit the market the next year. That's kind of how I look at it. If he's to sign this week, it's probably because he's getting that 7 year deal.
Yeah. If it's after the lockout, maybe there's a 2-year, $60 million deal in there somewhere. The thing with Baez, Joe, that I find interesting, and he could be gone by tomorrow, but
Go
the
on 5
amount
minutes, who knows?
the amount of teams that have that kind of, budget evaporates quickly. Like the Rangers are done, right? The Rangers came in and said we're going to
Half a
spend
bill.
an
Yeah.
unbelievable. The Mets are owning the headlines right now because of Scherzer, and it's the Mets. But what the Rangers are spending is not being discussed nearly enough with Seager, Simeon. They've made other moves. So that's a team that clearly wanted middle infield, and Baez did not go there. If Correa goes to the Tigers, Javi Baez is not going to the Tigers. So, and that's been a rumored spot for him for a long time. The Red Sox have been rumored for him. We don't know how. So, like you said, there's a lot. The good thing for the Mets with Baez is that I will say, and you do want this to drag out for after the lockout because that's the Mets' chance. Lindor is here. They are all in on winning, and Javi does care a lot about winning. They have the juice money on the short-term deals where if Javi Baez's market turns into a 1-year deal market and then hit next year because you don't have to worry about Seager, you don't have to worry about Correa, you don't have to worry about Story, you don't have to worry about all these guys in your position group. If that's the play for Javi, Mets aren't getting outbid. That's what you got to feel good about as a Mets fan right now is not only do you have things going your way where people might want to be here now, but you also own the instant dollar market, which is really what it came down to get Scherzer.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if he wants short term, I think the Mets will probably be willing to give him short term at almost whatever money. Because at this point, like I said, the payroll's over $270 million. It's probably going to push up toward $300 million. At this point, what's the reason to not spend more? If you're keeping it short term, just keep going. Like there's no reason not to. So you look at the starting pitching market, like we talked about, maybe a Rodon or a Yusei Kikuchi or someone else in that ilk. Keep that guy to a 2-year deal at a reasonable AAV, and you move forward there. They're looking in the reliever market right now, which you're looking at 1-2-year deals, depending on who they go for. You know, maybe someone like an Andrew Chafin. I know Martino mentioned Brad Hand, who, I'm good.
I like Chafin a lot more.
Yeah, I'm good on Brad Hand. I'd rather not, but it seems like it's a distinct possibility that the Mets will be doing something else before the lockout ends. I just don't know if it's going to be that shock move that obviously Max Scherzer was.
You know, in the comment here, I'm not convinced they're going to bring Marcus Stroman back. I don't think they're going to spend that kind of pitching money anymore for starters, but McNeil at second base feels like it's starting to become more and more realistic. We've always thought, you and I, that McNeil's season was more of an outlier than like JD and things like that, where McNeil has a sample size that you think he can get back to. Defensively, second base has been his best position. But, you know, there's the question of can him and Lindor have a dynamic that works? Of course, now we're wondering. But I wouldn't be very upset if the moves they've made and the moves they're going to make, probably a back end starter, right? Whether that's a 4 or 5, that's, you know, an argument. A big time reliever. They're probably going to go get like a reliever that you can pitch in the 8th inning and feel pretty good about. And then bench help pretty much at this point, where I like this strategy and roll with McNeil at second rather than just bring back, you know, I have no problem bringing Javi back, but I like that the Mets didn't try to do let's just run this back again and pay huge money to Stroman, pay huge money to Javi, and maybe make like an Escobar move. They do look different on paper, and things will be different in the clubhouse where, you know, some of the moves might not work, but right now you have to feel optimistic about the construction of this lineup. And I think in 24, 48 hours, we'll feel really good about the construction of this rotation 1 through 5.
Yeah, I think they're looking to change their approach a bit. Obviously, with Marte and Canna and Escobar, you're signing more contact hitters, a little less, you know, of the variance with the strikeouts, more of kind of they're going to put the ball in play, they're going to get on base. Like at least Canna and Marte. Escobar's not so much an on base guy, but he's a hit the ball, put it in play, has some power. So they're certainly changing their approach a bit. And frankly, you know, I think I think I tweeted or talked about on the podcast that, you know, maybe it's a little lazy, but the Mets haven't won anything in years. There's no reason to continue to bring back the whole band and just keep running it back and expecting different results. It's the whole definition of insanity thing. Stroman, I don't see it. Baez, maybe, but frankly, like I'd be perfectly content if the Mets didn't bring back a single person that was a free agent. And I am also confident in a Jeff McNeil bounce back. And I think fans kind of forget how good Jeff McNeil was prior to this season
I mean,
because
hung
it
around
was,
batting title
yeah, I
competition.
mean, all-star. He was a 4-win player. He has versatility, so certainly if something were to work out with Baez, they have the ability to make McNeil kind of a super sub. But if he's your everyday second baseman, I really don't think the Mets are going to be negatively impacted by having that in 2022.
I think the biggest question is McNeil staying healthy, because that was always his problem in the minors, and then it wasn't a problem early on here. And then last year he never looked right at all. Really, after he got hurt, he came back. He never looked like himself. Same with Conforto. Injuries are always a problem with this team. I agree with Dallas here. Baez was really the star of the team and his base running total difference maker. The good thing is Marte gives them a much needed base running element that I've complained about on the podcast for a year now. When they got Lindor, I was happy about that. When they got Baez, I was blown away by how good of a base runner he is. You love his power. You love his defense. You hate the strikeouts. You don't know if he's going to get back to the approach that really, hampered his hitting, but also the new approach that made him a great acquisition for the Mets. I think the perfect Javi Baez situation is that, it's unfortunate for him. His market moves a little slow. We don't see it really heat up again until after the lockout. And the Mets have the most power in the 1 to 2 year deal frame, where you have him playing basically for a contract year again. You don't have long-term money tied to him, but you got a hell of a baseball player at second base for you in Javi Baez in your competitive window. So, I think that's where we kind of leave the Baez conversation for now. I'm sure we'll revisit it on the podcast this week. Joe, I want to throw this one your way from Michael. Any chance of an Alonso extension in the near future? I know he's under team control for a long time, but we're seeing a lot of these teams try to get their young stars under control for 5 to 8 years now.
Yeah, Alonso's entering arbitration for the first time this offseason, so I kind of think that window is past where it really makes sense for a player to sign an extension, because now he's going to start making somewhat real money.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, what Pete Alonso will inevitably get when he presumably signs a long-term deal with the Mets. He's a little less motivated, I would say, at this point in time from just a contractual leverage standpoint. Certainly, if he wants to sign an extension, I imagine Steve Cohen would listen to that. But my hunch is you'll ride Alonso's arbitration out and kind of play that as you go.
All right, this one from Daniel. Basically, do they need to sign another outfielder? I know you and I, Joe, are excited about Khalil Lee as a bench piece. Hopefully next year he'll be ready for that. Gives you a little speed and defense off the bench. He showed a lot of pop when he went back down to the minors. But I agree here. It feels thin. We know the inevitable Nimmo injury is going to come down the pipeline. I don't think they're going to trade Dom Smith, which is that would be
Who knows?
that gives you a little bit more. Same with if you bring Javi back, then McNeil's an outfielder. There are so many variables to this question where I don't think you'll see that move anytime soon.
Right.
I think you would see that move closer to the end of February, maybe even spring training.
Yeah, I would think it. I do agree actually with Daniel that I would look to bring in this year's Kevin Pillar. It doesn't have to be Kevin Pillar himself, but someone similar, and just wait until February and just bring in more depth.
Yeah, so now looking at the rotation, we've talked about free agents a lot. Kikuchi, somebody that we could see them getting. Any trade candidates, everybody's got their eyes on Oakland. I know people, everyone's saying the Reds have been contacted for Castillo again. The price is outrageous, as it should be. The Mets are not going to be looking to trade for a premier starter. They're going to be looking to trade for a number 4 or number 5. But my take is, Joe, that the only way they make that move is if somebody wants JD Davis. They're not going to trade any prospects when they have the money to fill the same need, as we've seen already.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think right now you would feel more confident that it would be a free agency, whether that's someone like a Yusei Kikuchi that we mentioned. I think he's someone that does interest this team. And Scott Boras is his agent, so they clearly have a current working relationship with Scott Boras. So I think Kikuchi is a distinct possibility. If you want to talk the trade market, obviously Oakland is a place to look. Sean Manaea, Chris Bassett, those are the two that you'd want to keep more of an eye on, because they're in their last year of control with Oakland. So you'd be assumingly giving a little less, whereas a guy like Frankie Montas has a couple years of control. So I think his cost would be a little more. And then, of course, they didn't sign John Gray, so they could always trade for Sonny Gray and just fulfill that Gray quota.
Oh, man. I know you probably were like the least happiest Mets fan when the Scherzer news came down because you were still grieving from the John Gray news.
Hey, I'm glad John Gray got paid, and he's from Oklahoma, so he got to stay close to home. And yeah, he's not gonna have any income tax, so good for him.
So I think it was Mike Puma today that said the Billy Epler specifically is watching Gary Sanchez to see how his situation unravels with the Yankees. The question here: do you think the Mets are in on Sanchez?
I hope
I'm going to
not.
be honest with you, Joe. I can't even fathom any realistic explanation how Gary Sanchez makes any sense to this team. They have a good backup catcher in Nito. And all I care about from the backup catcher is defense. That's
Yeah.
all I care about. And you have a lot of money tied to Jameis McCann, although it looks like pennies now compared to the deals they've given out. Um, what the hell is Gary Sanchez's fit on this team?
He doesn't have one. He can't
No.
catch. He's not a catcher. Like,
Do you think that they think he can DH?
Oh God. I mean, that's what Robinson Cano is here for, I'd imagine. But I just can't see a fit with Gary Sanchez. Someone's going to take a shot on him if the Yankees non-tender him. I just don't see it here. James McCann's under contract. Like you said, they have Tomas Nido, who the pitchers love throwing to, and he's a very quality defensive backstop.
Best Twitter account on the roster.
Yeah. Oh, crushing Twitter, like just crushing Bob Nightingale. He's the best. But as far as Matt Boyd goes, that one's a little interesting. I mean, he had surgery, so he's going to be out at least half of this coming season. So he'd be a guy that you'd probably look at and sign for a 2-year deal with visions of him being a factor in 2023 more so.
All right, so some Jacob DeGrom talk today. Obviously, people are probably wondering now, like, will he be sour that he's not even the highest paid pitcher on his team anymore? I think DeGrom is a guy that's going to be very happy that Max Scherzer is here. Jacob DeGrom is paid pretty well right now. He's underpaid, which is hilarious considering the deal that he got. I believe his opt-out is after this season, correct, Joe?
It is.
Now, a lot of people are wondering, do you get that deal done now? I know this is hard to hear. I say hell no, because you just don't know medically what he even is anymore.
He needs to prove he's healthy. That's what it comes down to. And if he proves he's healthy, the Mets will have two $40 million pitchers in 2023. DeGrom has to prove himself, and he has that almost $30 million a year in his pocket. So if things don't work out health-wise, he still has money. He's not required to opt out. But I certainly would have the expectation that the Mets won't let DeGrom leave. So if he's really healthy and performs like we expect him to, they'll just find a way to pay him.
And I don't know why he'd want to go anywhere at this point. You've been around for so much BS. Yeah. Now you're in a situation where all that matters is winning, and all that matters is guys getting treated right. And that's what the Mets organization is trying to do right now. So maybe DeGrom will get $50 million. I hope DeGrom is good enough that he is warranted where we're talking about him as a $50 million pitcher. Like Joe said, if he's not healthy this year, he controls his destiny. He could stay in the contract for $30.5 million. That is a lot of money for a guy that would be not so healthy anymore, reliable anymore. Hopefully Jake is back, and just unbelievable because he is. It's so, you know what drives me nuts, Joe, today? I've been asked this a lot, and I'm having fun with it. I don't get like mad. Nothing can kill my vibe today. So everybody's like, well, Scherzer couldn't pitch in the World Series last year. I'm like, do you realize if the Mets' problem is that somebody's not healthy enough to pitch in the World Series, that I would be, if they got to, that is an amazing, like we're discussing, this is like the Jets all over again when they hired a defensive head coach. Everyone's like, well, now your offensive coordinator could be hired away. I'm like, the Jets even have a top 15 offense, then everything went right. This is the Mets question. Like if things are so right that the Mets are missing an arm for the postseason, I'm fine with that. Just get there and win some games.
And something I think that can't be understated is the front of this rotation might be the two most competitive pitchers in all of baseball, with the way DeGrom and Scherzer's just mental attitude is.
Psychos.
Do I think DeGrom is, butthurt or upset that Scherzer's making more than them? No, but I also think it's going to motivate the hell out of him to prove that he deserves to make that much too, or make more. He wants to win. He's competitive. Scherzer wants to win. He's competitive. And I think it can't be understated that Scherzer chose the Mets. So clearly the vision that Steve Cohen and, I'm sure Billy Epler was involved, the vision that they sold him, of course, he took the money. There's no question that he took the money. But I think if the Mets basically said like, yeah, we want to bring you in, sell some tickets and kind of see how it goes, like maybe he's a little less excited to come. But I think they sold a vision of how they're going to try to win right now in Scherzer's last couple of years. And the whole West Coast preference is something I definitely wanted to touch on in this video. That myth that he had a West Coast preference, I never understood why people thought that was a thing. He was born and raised in Missouri. He went to college in Missouri. He got drafted by the Diamondbacks, which is like West Coast-ish, but not really. He was there for 2 years of his big league career, gets traded to Detroit. Then after his time with the Tigers, signs a 7-year deal in Washington, D.C., buys a $10 million home in Jupiter, Florida for the spring training. And that's where like he and his family like reside. And he wanted to win a World Series in the year before free agency. And, LA, the Dodgers were widely considered to be the best team in baseball. So I think he just simply looked at it as right before free agency, let's try to win a ring and then, visit free agency when it is. So I'm glad that the perceived West Coast bias, even though he basically has 2 months of West Coast experience in his whole life, I'm glad that was clearly dispelled and not true.
All right, so this one from Alex. Can you guys speak to the change in the clubhouse atmosphere with these recent additions? Sounds like the team is serious about shaking things up. Something we've talked about is this was a team that needed a more veteran presence in my eyes. They were a pretty young team overall, and not just young in age, but young in postseason experience. And now they have all of that. They have guys that have been there, have routines, have winning routines. And I think that I think a little bit of the clubhouse stuff has been overblown. I don't really think there was like friction within the clubhouse last year. I think that I don't like using the word maturity because I mean they're grown men. It's not like that. It's just a matter of that a lot of those guys didn't necessarily know how to sustain winning in my eyes. And that's why they, amongst many other reasons, injuries related, they fell apart.
Yeah, I think they definitely have visions of shaking up this locker room. Eduardo Escobar, by all accounts, you've seen Taijuan Walker tweet about it. You've seen Trevor May tweet about it. Everyone seems to indicate Eduardo Escobar is like an A-plus kind of guy. Mark Canha is a leader. He was a leader in that Oakland locker room. So a lot of people speak very highly of him as a person. Starling Marte is more of your kind of quiet, go about his business guy. And you need people like that too. People that just kind of lead by example. Not everyone needs to be rah-rah and have things to say. Just shows up, goes to work every single day, and just plays his ass off. And then obviously you get a guy like Max Scherzer, and that is an alpha. So he is not going to stand for anyone not giving 110%.
Bullshitting.
Yeah. It is certainly a no BS locker room that has Max Scherzer and Jacob DeGrom in it. That's for sure.
And I don't agree with this from Todd. I think that New Yorkers love when people care. I mean, New York fans just, even if you lose, as long as you care, they love it. And Max is a guy that is fiery. I mean, he literally has a rivalry with Joe Girardi, who is in his division now as a manager. So I think it's going to be a great thing to watch, man.
I think it's awesome. And, Scherzer's the kind of guy that is such a bulldog. We use that term all the time talking about pitchers, right? Like, oh, this guy's a bulldog. Scherzer is an actual bulldog. Yeah, he is the bulldog. Like, whoever ends up managing the Mets, they better be prepared to get a reaming when they go try to pull Max Scherzer out of a game in the 7th inning. He doesn't take too kindly to getting pulled out of baseball games. So I think his attitude is going to be a massive positive for this team. And then, of course, if he's healthy and on the field, the Mets could potentially have the top 2 in Cy Young voting.
Great problem to have. So, all right, Kevin said ideal manager for this roster. We're in win now mode. Yeah, Kevin, I'm with you. I'm usually not like this with baseball, but I think I want someone with experience for this team.
I still think it's a philosophical thing. I'll still stand by that. I think the manager needs to be someone that's in line with what the philosophies are that Billy Epler and the front office and everything wants to push down. With that said, I do think Billy Epler has a lot of experience with people that have managing experience. You know, Joe Espada is probably like the inexperienced one that they might think about. I would say right now the leader in the clubhouse early on is probably Brad Osmus. I think Buck Showalter can get consideration, but
Billy Epler won't get the Osmus. It's like he will not. He will prove everyone I was right about this
yeah,
freaking guy.
yeah. I mean, I could totally see it. And, you know, Scherzer has a semblance of a relationship with Osmus from the time in Detroit. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. And that's really what's going to take over December, because this lockout starts in a couple days. And then I think you'll see the Mets move directly into the interview process, because even though player acquisition is locked, the Mets can there's no issue with filling out their coaching staff. And they obviously only have a pitching coach at this point. So there's a lot of work to be done. And yeah, I think Osmus, Buck Showalter, Joe Espada, those are three guys I think to keep an eye on early on due to kind of their prior experiences with Billy Epler. And who knows who he has up his sleeve as people that maybe we aren't thinking of.
Yeah, it could be a surprise hire. I think this is a. I never thought I would say this, but and I wish it wasn't going to be like 2 months, maybe long. Who knows? There is some good things for the Mets with this lockout. I think they need to catch their breath. Like you said, Joe, now they can slow down and hire somebody to coach the team. And I think that they can really breathe and look at the third tier of the market and go, these are guys that are going to get 1 year, $7 million deals that we don't want to have to trade for Cameron Maben in June or whatever it is again. So I think that as awful as it's going to be, you and I are dreading it for the pod, but the pod's still going to be good because we're planning guests with the pending lockout. The Mets are a unique case that it will help them in certain ways.
I totally agree. Like they'll be able to fully focus on this managerial search and not have to worry about the free agent market that they can't operate in anyway. So they can fully focus on developing their staff. And frankly, it's not going to be a bad thing. Exactly what Terrence just said is exactly what I was going to say. Epler now gets that opportunity to analyze the organization, figure out what everyone does, how everything works here, and he is able to learn the organization while not also, you know, multitasking with free agent talks and trade talks and things like that. He could be fully focused, and I think the Mets overall as an organization will probably benefit from this lockout.
Yeah, probably. They're probably the only team. Them, obviously the Rangers have been really aggressive. Shout out to the Angels for stealing Syndergaard and then coming up short. And
Shout out to Rob Martin, Steven Matz's agent, because he set Steve Cohen ablaze. And I'm not saying that if they signed Steven Matz, they wouldn't have signed Max Scherzer. But I think the way Rob Martin handled it made Cohen feel a little more aggressive.
Oh, there was a total "I'm going to show you people" attitude.
Yeah.
With Cohen probably reading his mentions too much. Daniel saying it feels good to have someone here in Epler who isn't married to any of these guys. I think it's great. I think that they've been a Sandy Alderson centric organization for a long time, and I will always say Sandy's done a lot of good things here for as much criticism he catches. I think it's great to have a true, total change of a guy that's going to be right down the middle with everything. You and I have said that the Mets are really in a nice spot with their scouting department, but you can argue that some of their pro decisions have been kind of up and down for a long time now. So I'm totally with that comment.
Yeah. Sandy's going to the Hall of Fame one day. He's a fantastic executive. He brought the Mets to one of two World Series of my entire life. So I certainly can't be too against him.
Totally.
But you take a guy like Epler, he could come in with a fresh look at things. We know it didn't work out with the Angels. There's varying reasons why it didn't work out with the Angels. Some may be his fault. A lot probably not his fault. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to look at not only the players on the roster, but also the people inside the front office, and a fresh look, and really be able to build your own culture. And we'll see if David Stearns ends up his boss in a year or two. But in the meantime,
I forgot about that entire situation throughout all of this.
in the meantime, Billy Epler could build up this organization the way he sees fit, and you cross that bridge when you get there. But I think it's only a good thing.
I'm not convinced Wild Bill even needs a boss anymore at the rate he's going, but I'll try not to get ahead of myself. Michael, thanks for the nice comment. Hopefully, one day that Mets will be a part of the team, affiliated with the team in some kind of way. We are still very young. We have
Yeah.
not been a show for even a year and a half yet, so we're just enjoying it. The way you can help us is subscribe, to the YouTube, follow the Twitter, and just interact with the show, and we'll always do the same. So.
And I'll say this: if you want to see us on SNY, I mean,
We
Connor,
both do work for
yeah,
SNY, ironically.
we both do work for SNY. Connor does Jet stuff, and he's done the gambling show. I forget what it's called, but I watched it when you were on with JJ.
Oh yeah, place your bets.
Yeah, place your bets. So, Connor's doing work with SNY. Of course, I do. I've been writing for them for a few years now. I'll have a top prospect list coming in the not too distant future. So that'll be some lockout reading for you. And then, of course, Mets perspective. You could go back and watch this past season of that. So
Yeah,
we're doing some stuff with SNY, just kind of in separate worlds. So who knows?
I know maybe it'll all come together one day. And you're gonna have a hell of a year with Mets perspective because the Mets have a ton of draft picks. So I think that's what's particularly so exciting to me is that they are not just saying it, they are truly showing that they are going to rebuild this farm system. And that is going to supplement this team in 2024 when veterans are on their way out and the young guys are on their way in. And then the real young guys are behind them to keep developing. Obviously a lot of good vibes today with Mad Max, Chris, good stuff. Everybody's got to be psyched. Terrence, real pod tomorrow night. Yep. Tomorrow is Tuesday. We will record. Pod always drops usually by 8 or 9 p.m. Thanks to our great editor, Neil at Blue Wire Pods. Okay. We'll get some more questions in here. There are so many Dodger fans that think Scherzer is washed. Well, yeah. Would they be saying that if he went back to them on a 2-year deal? Probably not. So I don't know, man. I'm not even entertaining the dead arm theory with Scherzer or anything like that. I think the guy is so different. He's so rare that let's just be psyched to watch him pitch.
And consider me a fool, but I'm thinking that if the Mets are investing $43.3 million a year to this guy, they're going to do their due diligence on his medicals. He's not just going to get, the clear pass through. So they'll definitely investigate. They have obviously investigated it and feel good about it. And, Scherzer's a pitcher too. So he's not just a thrower. So even if the stuff isn't prime Scherzer, or even if it's a tick down, I still think he's going to be incredibly effective.
All right. What's going on with Seiya Suzuki? Is he still a possibility for high upside outfield depth? I think he's going to get money that indicates he's a starter, right, Joe?
Yeah, I think Seiya Suzuki ends up a starter somewhere. I thought he was a Mets option, but it sounds as if he was not looking to sign before the lockout. So my expectation would be no on Seiya Suzuki here.
There's your unconfirmed Scherzer breakdown by the month, inning, hour, minute, whatever. Just rock with it. Good for Max. He's incredible. All right.
And don't forget, this year starts Max Scherzer's deferred money with the Washington Nationals. So while the Mets are paying him $43.3 million for the next 3 years, I believe it's the next 5 or 6 that the Nationals are paying him $15 million a year every July 1st. So the $1 million a year Bobby Bonilla thing is like 15 times for Max Scherzer. So Scherzer's gonna be making nearly $60 million for the next 3 years between the Mets and Nats.
Joe, I know this is a name you've brought up before. What do you think of Carlos Martinez?
He's a guy that I kind of look at as that in that Rich Hill mold that I spoke about earlier. Like, come on, are you willing to be in the bullpen? And then obviously you'll have some flex to be a starter. But I would imagine the Mets are aiming a little higher than Carlos Martinez for their rotation spot right now.
Oh man, this is a good one right here. I don't even know if this is true, but there's no way Michael K can be serious considering the team he works for and loves bought a World Series in 2009. How quickly people forget. Tell his GM to wake up from his entire offseason snooze.
Yeah, he's sleeping in the streets and everything. But no, I mean, look, here's what it comes down to. The problem in baseball aren't the Mets and the Dodgers that spend a lot of money and the Yankees who also spend a lot of money. The problem are the Pirates and the teams like that that don't. That's
You're
the problem
spot
with
on.
baseball.
You're spot on. It's a huge issue across the sport, and quite frankly, there's really no end in sight. You just have to hope that more guys like Steve Cohen, and there's not a lot of Steve Cohens out in the world, so that's an extreme example, but rich owners that care more about winning
Right.
than running a low budget business get in the league. And you know what? That goes to the commissioner more often than not, because Joe and I have said for a long time, the Wilpons got away with owning the Mets probably about 8 years too long or whatever it was. And it's not a story that's talked about enough, but it's a serious issue in many other places.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the commissioner works for the players. I'm sorry, the owners. They work
Yep.
for the. I started looking at players in the comment and thought players in my head. The commissioner works for the owners, so he's going to back the owners. So that's why you saw Bud Selig back the Wilpons, despite a lot of reasons to suggest that they shouldn't have still been owning a team.
All right, Joe, what do you think of Dom Smith and a prospect or two for Chris Bassett?
I'd rather have Sean Manaea,
Mm.
but I think you're on pace depending on what they do. If they sign anyone in the next day or two, I think if they were to sign like a Yusei Kikuchi, for example, I think that takes them out of the Bassett, Manaea, Sonny Gray world. Because then at that point, I know that people aren't confident in Taijuan Walker because of his second half, or they're not confident in Carlos Carrasco because obviously he was injured and certainly struggled when he did pitch. The reality is those two guys are going to be in the rotation. So you can't really get someone of super high quality as depth.
All right, one of the last ones here. We've been on for a while. We're doing the pod tomorrow. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be doing a lot of content. Johnny, do you think Freddie Freeman leaves Atlanta? I don't.
No,
I don't.
you'll just get whatever the most money Atlanta's
Yeah.
willing to give him, and he'll just stay there. And he shouldn't leave.
No, it makes sense for him. It's the East is going to be really interesting. I don't want to get too advanced into predictions yet. We always do that right before spring training.
Look, I'm not picking the Mets. I'm just getting it out there. I'm until the Braves get dethroned, I'm going to be picking the Braves, but the Mets are building up one hell of a roster.
Yeah, I picked the Braves last year. I'm not sure where I stand. I'm kind of 50-50 right now. Let's see what the rest of this offseason has in store.
Yeah, we got a couple months to really get to the bottom of it.
All right. That was fun. Love everyone's excitement today. I mean, obviously, this was one of the most fun days in a very long time. Like, this to me, maybe I'm like, this might be recency bias, but this felt maybe even a little bit more fun than the Lindor trade, because my initial reaction, like after the excitement, was, can they extend him? Like, does he want to be here? I start like panicking. With this, I'm like, oh, wow. I never thought Max Scherzer in a million years would be on the Mets. I never thought the Mets would be like the team gunning financially for a World Series. So it's been a fun day, man.
And the Lindor trade came out of nowhere, right? Like, it wasn't rumored. They weren't talking about it. It was a Jeff Passan tweet. I remember it, that the Mets, they're trading for him. And this whole free agency was very vintage Mets, where it's like, oh, they're close. Oh, they're finalizing. Everyone stay up all night. And then it didn't happen. And, people were like, oh, you woke up.
It's happening again.
No progress. It's happening. Trevor Bauer is happening over again, where the Mets are being used. And my understanding is, like, there wasn't a contract structure thing. This may sound crazy and boring, but my understanding is Max Scherzer simply wanted to sleep on it. Like, I think he just went to sleep and was like, I'll decide tomorrow. And, drove us all crazy. Certainly had us, we were sending each other every tweet from every writer, just text. And
I was so nervous when Joe's name would pop up on my phone, because I was just like, this could be the bad one. This could be the good one. I don't know.
Yeah, but ultimately it worked out. So it was a hectic last 24 hours. And yeah, I agree with what Alex said. Scherzer chose the Mets. And Lindor didn't choose them. Obviously, he ultimately did come springtime. But yeah, Scherzer had the option to go elsewhere and chose the Mets.
All right. If we were to, last one, this is from Abe. If they were to trade Mauricio, what level of pitcher can you get? He probably brings you back a good one. I just don't think they have any interest in moving those top 6 guys right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Mauricio alone isn't getting you like a frontline starter, but Mauricio packaged with, a lower level guy or two gets you a pretty damn good starter. But to your point, Billy Epler even mentioned it in his press conference that there's some top 100 type prospects in the system that they're not looking to trade. So, ultimately, you're going to have that crunch at some point with Beatty and Vientos and Mauricio as infielders, but you might as well keep them around and let that decision be made kind of for you, rather than selling and then maybe selling the wrong guy. So I think they'll keep those guys around for now, but certainly just be open minded. Like if the Reds really want Ronnie Mauricio and are willing to part with Luis Castillo, maybe your mind's a little different. But when you're talking what's generally available on the market, I think Mauricio should stay.
Yeah, that's probably more of a deadline conversation. If this team
Yeah,
feels like, Cookie doesn't bounce back and it's
right.
like, okay, Taiwan's been fine. Scherzer and DeGrom have been everything we wanted. We need a number three. We
Yeah.
need a number three. Then you're going to hear a lot of Mauricio because of the position questions and, Beatty and Vientos becoming what he's become. So,
And that's another thing too, where with team building, I know we're gonna hop off in a second, but
yep,
another thing when you
good
think
point
about
here.
team building, it's really you build to the trade deadline. Like in the off season, you're not building your quote unquote World Series team. Like obviously you're making the bulk of the moves, the major moves. But the reality is they're going to show up to spring training with unlikely to be a quote unquote perfect roster. And you see how the first half goes. And ultimately, like you said, what are the needs? Does Carrasco get hurt again? Does Walker not rebound from his second half? So is the need for a starter greater? Or does the offense maybe not perform to expectations and you have to go make an impact trade for a bat again? You just play for that first half and kind of see how it goes.
All right, everyone. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube, you'll get notified when we're on. Follow the Mets Twitter. That's the Mets Twitter. We notify through there. We will have a new pod out tomorrow night. For many, that comes to their phone probably Wednesday morning, but it is out at 9 p.m. if you need to listen right away and get your fix. Joe and I will be going live as much as we can. We've had a blast with this. So thanks so much, everybody. And we will talk to you tomorrow.